like winter will come again, summer will come again. And it's just like an analogy of basically saying like something that works for you at one point in your life won't work for you in the future. And then it may come back and work for you again, or like you might just move on to a different coat. So I think that just like, that was such a powerful analogy, just showing like, yeah, things are going to change and that's okay. And like, that's just a part of life. Like change is inevitable.
Welcome to the Brew. I'm your host, Valtteri Salamäki. Today I'm joined by my co-host. We have Luis Macedo, and we have a special guest. We have Hana from You'll Be Okay joining us today, and we're going to be talking about mental health. But before we get into it, Hana, I'm sure our audience would love to know a little bit more about your background and what you currently work on.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone listening to the podcast. My name's Hana. I'm a freelance copywriter currently, and I also am the founder of a platform called You'll Be Okay. And basically, I guess what I do with my freelance writing is a little bit different than what I do with You'll Be Okay. But my whole mission in life was to always help people and to always bring out the best in people, and just knowing that like reaching out a helping hand can always elevate the person next to you. And so I guess that's kind of where like my two platforms cross, because for my freelance career, I actually help small businesses with their copywriting. So I help them launch their businesses by writing copy for their websites. And they're usually creative entrepreneurs. And so what I really love about that job actually is that because they're creative entrepreneurs, I feel like they always have like such a strong mission. They're usually trying to, usually they're photographers. So they're trying to elevate other women, because usually they photograph women. So usually they're trying to elevate other women with their photography, which is a mission that I really connect with. So even though I do copywriting on one side, I love how it still kind of connects to my whole mission with just trying to elevate people and talk about mental health and talk about kind of the struggles that we all face because of diet culture and because of just, crazy messages from the media about like how we have to look a certain way. And so that's kind of what I also do on You'll Be Okay, is I'm just trying to dismantle diet culture. Specifically, I try to provide inspiration for those suffering with disordered eating and eating disorders and anxiety and depression. So yeah, that's just kind of like what I'm working on right now. So even though they kind of sound different, like when I just put it on a piece of paper, I love how like I've actually found an audience that like I can really connect with, and with clients that I can really connect with as well.
No, it's quite fascinating that you actually brought up that like copywriting is kind of your background, and then that from that forte you kind of built out this platform, this mission-driven platform that you're building out, because copywriting, the central piece of how you communicate something across, is the most important thing, and copy is that one singular element that creates it, because you can have the most beautiful graphics on a website or all these things, but if you can't put it into words, people can't really understand it or relate to it or kind of buy into what you're articulating across. So it's quite fascinating how your background's kind of all molded together into that passion that you have. But I guess the question to that is, what really kind of sparked that motivation for you to build out this open conversation tied into eating disorders, things when it comes to mental health awareness? Like what really inspired that kind of push forward?
Yeah, that's such a loaded question, I feel like, because my life, like I'm sure like anyone who suffered with any mental health can see patterns in their life where they've actually suffered from their, like whatever they suffer with. And that's kind of the same for me, where I didn't know I was suffering from any mental illnesses until I reached college and it started impacting my quality of life. And then I looked back on my life and I was like, oh dang, this has always been here. So what I thought was just like a little part of my life that happened to pop up was actually like with me this entire time. And so I think just realizing that and recognizing that it would have been really helpful if someone would have pointed out the signs to me early on, so I could have I guess like taking care of myself a little bit better. I guess like that's kind of where I'm coming from now, is that I really want to be an advocate for this space and be an educator and show people basically that there are people suffering from eating disorders and anxiety, depression, bipolar, whatever. Like people suffer from these just on different levels, but that doesn't mean that it's not valid, and it doesn't mean that you're not suffering from something. So that's like kind of where I came in. And I guess like when I first found out that I had an eating disorder as well, I felt really ashamed about it. But just going through my entire journey, I realized like, no, this is actually like overcoming this has made me who I am. And so I think that's also a really important message that I want to express to people, is that even though you may be suffering from something, it's okay, because you will get past this if you persevere, and you'll come out even better than before. And so I guess like that's also something else I'm trying to instill in people, is just like the education part, just knowing that you're not alone, and also just motivating people to seek treatment, because, you know, I feel like there's always the light at the end of the tunnel, as long as you keep going, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's honestly like, as you were going through your introduction, and you were like listing off the things that you're kind of assisting with, I was just like, check.
Right.
So it's one of the reasons that I was really excited to be a part of this podcast and be a part of this conversation that we're having is, I mean, me and Val, we didn't, and like the Free Logic team, we didn't meet until college. So that's kind of where I guess the genesis of our relationship kind of begins. But just to give a little background on me, right out of high school, I weighed like 300 pounds. Like I was a big boy. And I realized, I was like, oh, can't keep doing this. But instead of doing it a healthy way and like losing weight, I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to start riding a bike, because all my friends were riding bikes. So I started riding a bike, and that was my main mode of getting around. But then like, I just straight up said, hey, I want to lose a bunch of weight. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to like stop eating. Like, I'm just not going to do it. So what that transitioned me into was this, like, I would just ride my bike literally every day. I would ride like 50 miles a day, like a lot. Like I would just go to friends' houses and just ride around. I wouldn't eat. I'd eat like once a night, and it'd probably be like McDonald's. So like I wasn't like giving myself like healthy food. And then I would just smoke like in between. So like whenever I would get a little bit hungry, I would just pop a cigarette in my mouth while I was riding a bike and just like just look absolutely ridiculous. But that's kind of what I would do, you know? And that obviously led to just you name it amount of kind of issues after the fact. So I mean, you know, anxiety is a thing, depression is a thing that kind of comes after you shock your body. I mean, I went from, like I said, 300 pounds. I was 289 pounds at my heaviest. I went all in like 3 months. Made it all the way down to about 145, 150 pounds, like hard and fast. And after that, I was just like, well, this is my life now. But then like it was like very difficult for me to maintain that. And again, like I said, the anxiety starts kicking in because like, holy crap, the weight's coming back on. And then depression kicks in because holy crap, the weight is back on. And then like shock starts to set in, and you're like, okay, what can I do now that is going to have the same impact that the last diet I went on did? But in reality, but now I'm like, okay, but I can't smoke because that was bad. So it's like, okay, what can I do to kind of, to kind of taper myself down again? And it's, that was what, 2012, 2013. So it's coming on a decade now of me like every year, I think, getting a little bit better about like dealing with anxiety, dealing with like personal imagery, my personal image, and going kind of from there and where it's at. I say this not as here's my list of why I'm fucked up, but like I say it more of like, this is why I wanted to have this conversation. I think it's really rad that you're helping, because I would have loved to have had the resources that you're giving. When I was like right out of high school, showing that, there's a better way. There is a better way. The way that I was doing it was the wrong way, the incorrect way, the non-healthy way. And there's a way where you can do stuff. You can transition your body into what is a healthy perception that you want, while at the same time ensuring that you're being a healthy person. And I think that's a really hard for a lot of people, including myself, still to this day. It's very hard to walk that fine line of loving yourself, being healthy, and not kind of folding under assumptions of body and kind of perceptions of others. So thank you for what you do is what I wanted to say. And like I said, I think it's rad that you giving these resources out.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing your story. And I think it's really cool that actually you can be so vulnerable with saying all that, because I feel like not a lot of men talk about body image and about like their eating habits and what they struggle with, because it's just, like society has taught us that men are supposed to be strong, like emotionally, mentally, and physically. And like there's so much pressure on men to just not really talk about their emotions a lot. And then especially, at least like from my perspective, growing up in an Asian family as well, like that's even more amplified. And actually, I have a cousin in Ireland. My dad's side of the family is Irish and my mom's side of the family is Asian. So just like looking at that side compared to the other side, my Irish side, I actually have a cousin who struggled with an eating disorder around the same time that I did. And it's just, I don't know, I was so shocked to learn, because it's like you don't hear these stories about men going through this. And so I think that's slowly changing, luckily. But I mean, there's still a huge gap in this area that like needs to be filled. And like men are under reporting their eating disorders, and so the statistics are all off and everything. So yeah, thanks for sharing your story and being so vulnerable with it. We definitely need more people like you to speak up.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's to kind of echo your point as well. I mean, I'm coming from a Mexican culture where we're just run off of machismo, like entirely. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things to where like, the thinner I got, the more like my dad would, be like, hell yeah, dude, like, now like, build muscle and all this and all that. Or when I would play soccer, it'd be like, I had to be like this, like shining example of like, a midfielder, or when I was like, whatever it was, So no, I understand kind of that perspective as well, coming from a culture that is of one mind, and is very kind of resistant to change in some way, shape, or form, whether that's obviously the mental perspective or even individual perspective when you're dealing with like a child or yourself.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's where like, I guess our generation is so important, because we've kind of gone through like this really interesting time, I would say, when we grew up with like diet culture was so huge. Like, we were still in the stage of like Atkins and like all the, like, there's nothing better than skinny feels or whatever that quote was. So like we grew up kind of like in that era where diet culture was just rampant. And then all of a sudden we have this like younger generation, and then also us who like, we also feel the repercussions from that era, just saying like enough, like we can't do this anymore, like we can't hide anymore. Like we need to talk about this because more and more people are suffering and it's getting in the way of our quality of life. So it's really interesting to just see that kind of shift in conversation. At least like that's how I kind of experienced it, because growing up, like I had no idea what mental illness was. Like I had, like you, like I had no idea what I was doing until I reached college and I was seeking help from a therapist. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting time, because we're definitely seeing more and more people talk about it, but we didn't grow up that way. So there's still like, I guess, a little bit of shyness in some of us about this conversation.
Yeah. It's just such a taboo topic, or it's been, right? Like that. I think that's the issue, is people shy away from it because it has that social stigma tied into it. It's like you want to appeal to those of your peers that I'm fine, no matter what the situation is, and that's human behavior, which is very detrimental to humans, right? Because the more we articulate, the more we talk about stuff, the more we can solve issues that we're internally dealing with, or what our friends are dealing with, or anybody else is dealing with. It's that communication side and the openness to have those conversations with people. But I definitely do see how like societal norms just make it, in the past especially, like I think it's opened up because more people of influence are showcasing it on, you know, socials and all these kinds of things in a positive light. There's obviously negative repercussion to social and all that as well that we can discuss with mental health. But on the positive light, people are willing, like, it's the information is more accessible now. Like it's way easier to get information and find out that I'm not the only person dealing with that thing. I'm not the only person dealing with that. And that relatability with other people that are willing to articulate what's going on is what I think is creating a little bit more comfortability in societal norms to kind of lower the barrier of it having been like super harsh and like, don't talk about that, it's your own personal problem, all these kinds of things. To like, now it's like, no, let's have a conversation, let's figure it out. It's a serious thing that like you brought up, it impacts our quality of life. And it's very interesting with like younger generations as well, because way that people are choosing jobs, what they want to do, what they value as health benefits, all these kinds of things are now transitioning over. I think it's just a massive shift into like how we see society as a whole. And I think that's just at the end of the day, what's really driving the conversation in the right direction. I think it's just where younger generations want society to go to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I was preparing that all day. You know, I was just like writing down notes.
Practicing it in front of the mirror.
I had that.
This is my moment.
No, but yeah, no, like that. I think that's kind of the like Luis said. Like it's great to have these conversations, right? Because like me and Luis, we openly talk about every stupid thing we've done in our lives and like what impact it has, and like. We joke about it all the time, but because through like humor, in my opinion, humor is the easiest way to talk about stuff, because it takes that kind of like harshness away from it. It's like I can say something that like is quite depressing, but I say it in a joke, and it's like that's fine, right?
Yeah.
Like
that's how I operate too.
100%. Yeah. That's the whole reason that me and Val I've always made the joke, the yin and yang joke, but like it's because I feel like we're both on the same level of depressed. So we can just like bounce our like we're like, hey, these are cries for help, but they're coming out as jokes, but like we're just it's fun. Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah. I had a friend like that as well, where like we were both suffering through anxiety at one point in our lives, and like we both were really open to each other about it, and we were such good friends that like we would just joke to each other all the time. And we would be like, oh my gosh, can you even imagine if you started getting an anxiety attack and then I would start getting an anxiety attack, and we'd just be sitting in the car having an anxiety attack together. Like we would just like laugh about it though, because I think like definitely no matter like what you're suffering from during a recovery, I think it can get so serious sometimes. And like you just kind of got to bring that humor back and like that light back. And like humor is just such a good way to do that. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's half of all of my jokes, if not 80% of all of my jokes, are thinly veiled cries for help. I want.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I feel you.
Yeah. So I mean, I like humor is a good tool when I think it comes to conversation about mental health. But what are some of those like avenues that you've noticed that have made it easier to have communications about mental health, or how to like articulate it across, or have not necessarily like people having to open up necessarily, but like people like listening in, like understanding what you're talking about and relating? Have you found any mediums or ways that it's been easier to communicate across things tied into mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like honestly, Instagram has been a pretty good way to connect with people, because I actually started my Instagram, not the You'll Be Okay one, but I have a more like, I guess, quote unquote, like personal, where like the public can follow me. I started that account as a way to just like post photos of my food and get feedback and encouragement from other people who were suffering from eating disorders or who had already recovered. And so it was basically like a food/emotion journal of mine, where I could just connect with other people who were in the same boat as me. Because in my actual like real in-person life, I didn't really have anyone who I felt like I could talk to. Not necessarily because like I didn't have any close friends who were willing to help me out, but like I was just so vulnerable and so scared of what I was going through, that I didn't really feel ready to come out with people just full on. And so hiding behind a screen and just posting photos anonymously was just such a good way for me to really connect with other people. And I guess as I started recovering, then I had a lot of like self-reflection, and I noticed things about my triggers, and like I just started finding out a whole bunch of stuff about myself that like I didn't know before. And so that's when all this transformation started happening, and then this page has become what it is. And then I created You'll Be Okay, just because like I learned so much in my journey. And yeah, I think it's been like 7 years or something since I first attended therapy. And so like a lot of transformation has happened since then. And I've just been still been using Instagram to take people throughout my journey. It's just something like I never really could get away from, I guess. So yeah, that's just like kind of where I am. I think Instagram is just like the main platform that I can talk to everyone, because everyone else is on Instagram too. So yeah, it's easy.
I think that's funny. So the joke has been made before about my Instagram discover feed is just like deadlifts, dudes, and dogs. Like that's it. Like it's just like guys, just absolute peak fitness. So I don't try to go on Instagram too much now. I really just go on Instagram now to like put on my story that I'm at a basketball game. Like at this point, that's the only reason I
just to show me that he's at a Lakers game, and I couldn't show it if I bought tickets. That's pretty much
exactly. Yeah, that's all I do now. But one thing I have I remember I was like so hesitant on like doubling down on it, and now I do enjoy it, is like the mental health side of like TikTok. Like I have learned so much that like even like therapy and stuff like that hasn't given me, like just from like people who are like going through different things than that I'm going through. So they obviously have different conversations with their therapist, and they have different kind of outcomes and different realizations. And you know, people post that stuff on TikTok, and it just like makes me go like, holy crap. Like it's like, this is like, it's cool. It's honestly rad. Like high school me, and I guess like post high school me, like I feel like all social media was like showing off only the good. You know, it was never show off any of the bad. It solely existed to show people your social status. And very rarely did you ever show a below average social status on Instagram. It was always best foot forward. So it was never, I'm dealing with mental health issues, or I'm dealing with the eating disorder, or I'm dealing with depression, or I'm dealing with insert, you know, whatever it might be. Instead, it was always, you know, here hanging out at the beach, like how, you know, like doing things like, oh, I'm traveling, I'm at a game, I just bought this new thing, check out all these things that I have. That's what social media always was. But now I think, again, kind of going back to what you brought up at the beginning here, is there is a transition now away from this like materialistic, keeping up with the Joneses kind of mentality on social media. And now it's kicking into, no, you're a person, you matter, be happy. And I think that is, it's fantastic. And I mean, I'd love to follow the people that you follow on IG if you're getting like, if you're getting that kind of like positive kind of bubble that you have. Because I definitely don't have that right now on IG. That's why I just shy away from it. I don't really go on IG too much. It's just Twitter and TikTok now.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean, because social media is definitely like what you make it, right? Like if you follow the right accounts, it can be a really positive place. And because I've been on it for so long, I guess like I've been able to kind of filter out my feed and know what works for me. And actually, it's really funny that you bring up the discovery page, because I was looking at my discovery page a few months ago, and it was all these videos and photos that like I'm just not interested in. Like I don't know where this was coming from. It was like things about celebrities and then like beauty tips, and I was like, this is not my world. I don't understand any of this. So I worked really hard, and I liked a bunch of pictures of really cute animals. And then, and now, okay, it took like 2 months to do this, but now my discovery page is just cute animals.
I want to show this. Jesus Christ, the first thing on my discover feed is a dude doing squats. Can you see that?
Yeah,
It's visible.
wow.
It's just
Yeah,
someone
I can like see his outline.
he's getting it too. Good for you, buddy.
Yeah.
And like that's the thing. That's the thing though. Like this isn't the worst. Okay, so dudes deadlifting, basketball, and J. Cole. That's my discover feed today. So there you go. No animals today. No dogs today.
Oh man, you're missing out.
Yeah, I guess I just gotta go like a bunch of animal pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
It takes
Like,
a while.
does it?
It takes a little bit of time, yeah. I was working pretty hard at it for like 2 months because I was just determined to not see anything else but cute animals.
I'm afraid that it's gonna backfire me though. I was on TikTok and I saw a video of these dogs getting adopted from City Pound, and oh my god, I've never cried so quick. Like I went through it the first time, and I was just that was just like the emotions built the first time around. But then like the second time around when it hit me that all these adorable dogs were up for adoption, I was like, where is this place, and how can I get all these dogs? It's like I like literally like I just like keep crying, just like messaging it to my wife and being like, where are these dogs? So I think it might backfire.
Yeah, I guess you'll have to find another area that you're really interested in. Plants?
Double down on deadlifting, I guess. It's got double down on it. Double down on shredded dudes.
But yeah, so I mean, as for I don't even know how to transition from there, Luis. But as for as for like when it comes to overall like on social media, right? Like we talked about, it can be a positive place and it can also be a very negative place. Do you have any advice for those to, I mean, aside from liking a bunch of dog photos and animal photos to build up your serotonin whenever you go to discovery feed, do you have like recommendations where people can make their social medias more positive, right? Of course, like following certain accounts, that helps, right? You know, eliminating things that are, you know, bothering you, that helps. Like be very real with yourself. If something you see as negative, you can get rid of it. Obviously, if something you see as positive, you can amplify it. Do you have any tips for people to kind of build out that kind of positive ecosystem for them, right? Because that at the end of the day, if you want to really focus and help build on mental health, you got to surround yourself with that more positive, uplifting conversation or open conversations, because that'll help any individual deal with whatever they might be going through at that point in time.
Yeah, I guess there are like 3 things that immediately come to my mind on how to do that. And like you said, like following positive people, those who actually support your journey and who encourage you to be better, that definitely helps. And, you know, sometimes someone can be positive, but for some reason their message isn't speaking to you, and that's totally fine. And you can unfollow them, because even though they're positive, it doesn't mean that their message is going to apply to you. Everyone kind of has a different experience. So I think just being really real with yourself on who is actually serving you is going to really benefit you. So follow the people who you really resonate with, or like their message. If you really resonate with their message, go ahead and follow them. And then on the flip side of that, unfollow people who don't speak to you. And that one's like, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult to find people who like you don't want to follow anymore, because sometimes you're just like following, and then all of a sudden like your feed just kind of builds up and like gets really chaotic and cluttered. So what I usually do is, and I guess this is the third thing, is do like a little social media audit. So I go through either like I'll just scroll and I'll look at people's captions and stuff, and I'll be like, oh, I don't remember why I follow this person, or like, oh, this caption's like a little bit strange and I'm not sure like how this got into my feed. I'll go to their profile and I'll check it out and I'll see like, okay, is this person serving me or not? And then I'll also sometimes just go through my following list and I'll just kind of unfollow from there. And it takes a little bit of time, but if you do it like once a month or so, and you just do it in like little batches, slowly but surely you'll start curating a feed that speaks more to your recovery journey and like your mental health journey. So yeah, it takes like a little bit of time, but the effort is definitely worth it. Oh, and another thing that I just thought of is you can download third-party apps that tell you how long you've been spending time on an app, and you can actually set a timer for how long you want to spend on an app every day. So for example, my boyfriend has this third-party app. I don't know what it's called, but he set a limit to like 15 minutes on YouTube every day and like 15 minutes of Instagram every day. And once you use up that amount of time, then it'll like lock your screen. And you can unlock it, but I mean, you should probably go with what you set your time to. So that's like another way to remind yourself like, oh shoot, maybe I'm mindlessly scrolling right now. Like I should really get back to what matters.
Yeah, and I think the couple pieces there that you brought up are very, very important. One is like weed out all the noise that is going on. Like it's not like I follow a bunch of my friends and stuff like that, but if it gets to the point where like I'm just mindlessly scrolling and just liking photos and engaging with it, or like there's stuff that kind of like bothers me, like it's just random people going on like random political rants and stuff like that. I'm like, why am I even following you at this point? Obviously I'm just like, screw it. Like I'm going to either unfollow you. I don't care. Like it's not worth my noise. Like, look, you do what you want with your life. And I have nothing against that, but I'm not going to waste my time, like even putting a slight bit of emotion or even that 5 seconds that I'm scrolling through my feed to like it. So I think that's an important piece. And then the other thing you brought up is like limiting your time and actually being aware of how much you spend on applications, because that is the danger side of social media is how much people spend on social media platforms and how much they spend on TikTok and Instagram, because they design algorithms to make you want to consistently go back and engage with it, which is a bit scary in some essences, but it also does give you, more valuable content. It's more curated content and stuff like that. But being conscious of that, right? And if it's eating away too much of your time, finding ways to discipline yourself or restrict yourself or whatever those mediums might be, it helps form those better habits. Because I noticed myself like late at night, like before I went to sleep, I was on TikTok and just like that, like 10 minutes, I'm like, I'm just gonna scroll through a couple, like turns into like 30 minutes of being mindlessly scrolling. Like, man, I'm like losing sleep to watch like minute clips that have no impact on my life. Like, why am I wasting my time doing this? And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to stop doing that. I made it a habit and I stopped doing that. I no longer look at TikTok before I go to sleep. Now I like only look at it in the morning and check it out real quick if I have to look at. But even small habits like that also made my sleep patterns better, allowed me to focus better, gave me more time. So that I think that overall when it comes to social media is like, you just have to be disciplined and realize that it's taking a lot of your time. And then also weed out the noise. Like if you're going to spend your time on social media, make sure that's impactful time on social media. It's not a bad thing to be on there, but you definitely don't want to surround yourself with conversations that might not apply to you or might be negative to you.
Yeah, and another thing that I just thought of actually when you were talking about like your friends who go on like political rants is if you feel really awkward about unfollowing people, you can also mute them. So like you can, like turn off their stories and like their posts or whatever, but it still looks like you're following them. So at least like you won't have that awkward situation where you're like, oh, sorry, I didn't know I was unfollowing you. Like, it kind of avoids all that. But then you're still saving your mental health. So yeah, but I mean, I can say all these things, but I know that I need to work on my time on social media because I'm definitely on there for probably a little bit too long. Like you like scroll through at night.
it's all balanced. Like I said, like there's right. I would not say there's too much time spent or too little time spent. It's like what is right for you and what you think is real. That's really what matters. And as for those that I'll go on those political rants, no, I don't mind if they see that I unfollow them. I'll have that conversation in person. Me and Luis will definitely not shy away from a confrontation, but it's more as in like I don't want to spend my social media time on that. I'd rather have that conversation in person and have a formal debate if that was to be a conversation. I do like political commentary. I just don't like political noise, which I think is the other arena to that. But to your point, that is if you don't like confrontation, right? Like me and Luis are kind of different in that world, right? That I think that is a good approach, right? You can always mute them. You're still can be friends with them. Everybody can have their own opinions. And you can do it in a way that you always feel comfortable, because at the end of the day, that's the biggest thing when it comes to decisions you make in your life. It's like what makes you comfortable is what you should be focusing on.
Exactly.
I am not afraid to confront somebody if they're like, why'd you unfollow me? Like, are you I can go to town on that, because it's so like during this last political presidential campaign and all that stuff, like I unfollowed so many people. And I never unfollow people because of the way that they vote and the way that they lean. You can say, like, you can have in your bio that you're a Trump supporter and you just get put on a list for me. You're like, all right, Like you're on thin ice, buddy. Like you better chill out. But it's always when the hateful speak starts. So like I remember when like the BLM marches started happening. Like my unfollow finger was on a heater that whole like little bit of time. Like it was just like people would post things about like, look at these, can you believe these people are looting? I'd be like, block, like unfollow and block, like I'm done with you. Like the minute it gets to where you start to become like, I see like xenophobic takes, or I see racist takes, or I see just bad takes, like really bad takes. I'll unfollow you in a heartbeat, and I'll tell you to your face why I did, because I more than likely will remember why I unfollowed.
Yeah, and that's honestly why I had to just like get off of Facebook, because that's where, you know, a lot of the chaos happens. And so I didn't really go on it that much anyways, because I don't know, it's just so outdated now. And I just feel like it's just for like the older generation to rant about things that I don't really care about.
Yeah.
So like I didn't really go on it anyways, but it was just like, it was amplified during all that. And like, I heard so many crazy things from like both sides that it just got me so emotional. And so I just had to distance myself from it. I was like, this is not a good place for me to be, even though I'm sure like in how I feel about everything, it's just like, this is too much.
Yeah. No, it just goes to that level of noise, like what you're really comfortable with and what you want to deal with, where you want to put your energy to. Because if you spend your time on energy on things that don't help in any way, shape, or form of where you're trying to go or what you're trying to do in life, at the end of the day, it's just really, all it can do really is cause a negative effect. Like it'll give you a negative emotional reaction to what's going on, and that doesn't, you know, help anything out when it comes to that.
To your point about social media, I brought this up before to my therapist, and I was like, I would just go on rants and be like, these people said this, and it messed with me. Like I was like, it got to me. Like she's like, what, did you respond to it? And I'm like, no, but I sat in it, you know, for a while, and just like got like kind of mixed up my emotions. And the best way I've seen it, it was explained to me was, who you follow on social media, and your social media as a whole is just a house, and every social media is a bedroom, and the people you follow and the people you interact with are the people who exist in that bedroom. Like, do you want somebody in your house screaming like pro-Trump rhetoric? Like probably not. So like that was like the mind shift for me. And since then it's been the deadlifting dudes are the worst of my issues now, which is I think a good place to be.
Yeah, it's helping you with some form, you know, getting back in back in the
exactly
your leg days and workout days.
There you go.
Got inspiration now.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, but
that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, it's always the way that I've seen it, and that's the way I kind of look at it now. It's like, nah, dude, like my tolerance is so low now, just because I don't know. I feel like if you're gonna be mean on social media, then you're probably just like a mean person in general. So like, I'm just not gonna follow you. Like, why you gotta be mean? Just like, it's so much harder to be mean than it is to be nice. Like, it's just crazy to me.
It is, yeah. One thing that my friend told me when like I got this like rude mean comment one time, and this my friend was just like, wow, this person woke up and decided to be a villain today. I wonder how they can live with that. And I was like, whoa, yeah, they did decide that for themselves. Like, it's not about you, like, you know, they decided to be the villain. So I thought that was just an interesting perspective.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what other people say is their take. It's not the definition of the person they're talking about. It's more reflection on their own ideologies or thetheir own struggles or on these things. And that's one thing I've learned is usually the people that tend to be more aggressive on social media are sometimes those that are actually like really crying for help or really need help, or you know, have something tied there. And then there's also those people that just want to be a jackass. Like there's kind of there's a balance of both worlds. But yeah, you actually actively have to try to be negative, versus if you're just positive and uplifting, it's a lot less, you know, it's very easy to congratulate. Like I love congratulating people when they succeed and just sending them a quick message. And like I enjoy that, and it doesn't take any effort of my own. It literally takes 2 seconds, and that might make the other person also happier by, you know, being acknowledged of what they've been working on, versus being negative, which doesn't do good for either party. So
That's so
Right.
weird you brought that up. I might have a few. Maybe you didn't press send on a few of the congratulations messages, or what's maybe got stuck in the got bad internet or something. Val, what's going on, dude? What's
It probably was good because like I don't have an iPhone, and just
Oh,
the
that's it.
messages
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the non-superior technology just can't receive SMS messages on your
Yeah,
your
okay, yeah,
iPhone
you're right.
device.
You're right. Yeah, not superior. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
He forgot to press schedule. Like, go out
Yeah.
at 8 a.m., please.
No, I think I think all this stuff is pretty important. I mean, when it comes down to the whole thing, it's the human brain was not meant to be on social media. I think that's just like pretty much like what the research is showing us. But it's kind of turning it around in a way that I think that, I mean, I'm sure that you are also you're a part, basically, Hannah, of like the good shift towards like where social media is now like shying away from idealistic kind of stuff and now going into more individual praising and kind of building the person up. So I'm curious as to like who were your influences. But obviously you mentioned that therapy and your therapist kind of help you and all these things, but like who were the people that you kind of sought out as like you're like, oh wow, look at what they're doing? Like I'm just curious.
Yeah. I guess just like people who are very genuine on social media. I just always gravitate towards more genuine people because that's just kind of like the person that I am as well. I guess like I like to have genuine conversations and genuine relationships and just like kind of cutting all the small talk and just getting down to like the deep stuff. I noticed that when I talk to some of my friends, like sometimes I just go on like this huge like philosophical rant or something because I don't even know why. Like I guess it's just who I am and who I've become because of my journey. So yeah, just people who can be really real, and because we need more of that. Like people are going through real stuff in this world. There's no reason to hide it and pretend that everything's fine. So yeah, just basically anyone who I feel like is actually talking about not just like when they feel happy and positive, and not even just like spreading positive vibes, but just people who can acknowledge that like there are going to be good days, there are going to be bad days, and like we all just have to kind of go with it and persevere. Yeah, so I can't really say that there's like specific accounts, I guess, because I've just kind of curated my feed to be like that. But one account that I do know at the top of my head, because I like kind of recently followed her, is Mal's Fit Kitchen on Instagram. She's like kind of the person that I just really connect with because she's just so real, and she's a dietitian actually. And she helps people recover from, well, not recover from their eating disorders because she's not qualified to do that. I'm not sure if she's like in the process of getting her qualifications for that, but she helps people with disordered eating. And she's like one of the few people online that I just feel like, wow, like I know exactly what you're talking about. And like this totally resonates with me. And even though I'm not suffering from an eating disorder anymore, like I still really love her message because it's just genuine. And actually I've met like a few of my friends who I have now on social media as well. There's this one woman in particular, her name's Michelle, and she really helped me in my early days. And we actually met on Instagram, and I just connected with her because she was just like, she was encouraging, but then also just like pushing me. And we eventually exchanged numbers and we're still friends. So that's been pretty cool as well. So yeah, just anyone who's willing to just have a real conversation.
Yeah, I think that's great because like, you have obviously like I said, social media is what you make it. If you curate your social media to be aggressive or hostile, that probably is what you're gonna get. But if you curate it to be welcoming, the listening and heartwarming, like all these kind of things, you're gonna get that as well. And one thing that I will say, and I'm sure it's self-explanatory, but I think it should be said, is like you can always change your feed. I mean, to your point of liking cute animal pictures, for 2 months to so that your Discover feed is now just that. You can always change your social media. You can change your social media habits. You can change the people you follow. You can start fresh. People do it all the time. Delete all your pictures, start again, or don't delete them. Do whatever you want to do. But just know that the social media that you're in currently, and what you're seeing and how it's making you feel, should not be a permanent fixture. You can change it, you can alter it, and you can manipulate it in a way that best fits you, your journey, and who you are as a person.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, that kind of reminds me, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and this one, I believe she's a therapist, but she was talking about how one of her professors was actually saying, like, imagine that you are in the middle of winter in New York City, and you're wearing a big winter coat. That's going to keep you like really warm, and it's going to keep you protected from the elements, and you're going to find a lot of comfort in that. But eventually summer will come, and if you're still wearing that warm jacket, like, that's not serving you anymore. You got to take it off. And, like, winter will come again, summer will come again. And it's just like an analogy of basically saying, like, something that works for you at one point in your life won't work for you in the future. And then it may come back and work for you again, or like you might just move on to a different coat. So I think that just like that was such a powerful analogy, just showing like, yeah, things are going to change, and that's okay. And like, that's just a part of life. Like, change is inevitable.
Yeah. It's I forget which philosopher said it, but I think it's the only constant is change. It's that's I think something that the quicker you appreciate that, I think the quicker you be like, okay, my life isn't that scary. Just kind of sit back and enjoy it while you can, I guess.
Yeah, totally. That was something like I hugely struggled with before. I was like, a big part of my recovery is learning how to accept change. I think a lot of us can relate to that too, or like change can be really scary because there are a lot of unknowns. But yeah, like you said, like once we can learn to accept that, and like the sooner we can learn to accept that, like the better everything's gonna be.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess one where this conversation is kind of steering towards is, what do you think is kind of in the future of like mental health awareness, or where do you think those things are going? Because like one thing that shocks me, is quite surprising, is that things like mental health aren't really talked about even in formal school, right? In academia, we don't talk about it, and it's actually quite ironic to me that academia prepares you for a job, but not to deal with the anxiety of the job, not to deal with, depression associated with the job, none of these mental health orientations, which one makes you a better employee, two find something you're actually passionate about and like a career there. Because a lot of students I see, they want to go for the big names. Like, I want to work at Google, I want to work at Deloitte, I want to work at these big companies, which to each his own, it might be a good fit for you. For a lot of people, it's not, because that lifestyle is very, very harsh, and not everybody's kind of intended to do that kind of a lifestyle. But because things like mental health are never talked about, I feel like those that then go on to their career paths then are trying to learn in real time, which is very costly. Like for me, it's like I've always struggled with anxiety, but never to the extent that like it's taken over my life until this year. Like this year, there was a point where like I literally couldn't drive for a whole month, and I had to find out, like I literally was just like searching online like remedies and stuff like that. And one of them I found was like, always have salt on you. So just FYI, this is definitely not medical advice, but for those that deal with anxiety, if you have salt on you, like literally a baggie of salt, if you ever have an anxiety attack and you put a little bit of salt on your tongue, it overrides the senses that are overriding your brain, because it allows you to focus on a singular object versus it overcoming your entire body, which is why that helps. And like, these are like small things. I'm like, never thought in my life I would be looking online, like, how do I deal with these kinds of things, right? But I was never taught what a anxiety attack feels like. I legit thought I was like dying. Like that's what it felt like. I was blacking out. Like I was driving and I felt like I was legit about to die. So it's like, this is not taught in school. So where do you think, like, when it comes to mental health awareness and all these kinds of things are going? Because it is becoming, like we're talking about, more, normal for us to talk about it in an open venue, versus it being just like a closed subject matter that once you deal with it, then you go to a therapist. Do you think, what is in the future of when it comes to the awareness and conversations around this topic?
Oh, that's such a good question. And just to backtrack a little bit, when you talked about the salt, that's really funny that you brought that up, because when I was really struggling as well and I was having a bunch of anxiety attacks, my therapist actually recommended me to hold a piece of ice so that would kind of like put my focus somewhere else. And then also another thing that really worked for me was going outside and like counting the leaves on a tree, because that would also like put your focus somewhere else. That's really interesting. I didn't hear about the salt thing before, but like it's kind of like a similar concept. So dang, I hope people who are listening can get that little nugget of wisdom and try that the next time they're having an anxiety attack, because you're so right. It feels like you're gonna die. Like there's definitely moments where I'm like, oh my God, I can't breathe. Like what's gonna happen to me? And yeah, like you said, like we don't learn that in school. And so I think that's a really great way to start, is just teaching people in school. You know, like when you're in middle school, they teach you physical health and like sex ed and everything. Mental health should be a part of that kind of education. I think it's really important to learn that when we're really young, because it can affect you so young, and it's affecting kids more and more now these days. So I think like education, first of all, included in like the physical education and sex ed is really important. And then also, I think it's important to continue that education in college, because college is also a huge change. And that's, at least like, that's where I really started struggling, was when I was in college and all of my friends were moving away, and like I moved away from home, and it was just a really scary shift. So luckily on most college campuses, there is a therapy office. Either you can talk to like a licensed therapist, or you can talk to grad students who are in the process of becoming a therapist. So just making that more well-known to people, that they can go see a therapist for free on campus. Luckily, I went to Davis, and there we actually had quite a few resources for therapy, and they made it pretty well known that there was a therapy spot on school, like an actual building. So yeah, just like making sure that that is implemented in every school. And then I think what we've seen really from last year is that a lot of people actually suffer with like anxiety, and burnout. Burnout is huge. And so making that space in the workplace, and just letting employees know, like, you can come talk to this person to talk about like whatever you're going through, and just, recognizing the signs of burnout. I know that there's actually a program, I think it's available to part-time employees and full-time employees, but there's like an employee, I want to say it's like EPA or something. It's like an employee assistance thing where you can go see a therapist for like 4 sessions. But like, I feel like no one knows about that. And I just learned about it recently. So just making that space and like making sure that everyone knows, like, hey, we care about your mental health. And like, because, when someone's mental health is affected, their productivity is also affected. So I think just making it known and not being so ashamed about hiding it, and just like trying to be the best employee you can by working so many hours. That's not really what you're there to do. I mean, it may be a huge driving point for some people, but it's really important to recognize that everyone has a limit.
That last part, I think the way you said is like knowing your limit, right? And like being realistic with yourself, it comes from that. So I think step 1 would be teaching self-reflection at a younger age, and like teaching how that, how you can reflect, understand things like mental health, physical health, all these things that tie into it, and learn how to reflect early on. I think that's an important thing to teach at a young age. And then from there, like expanding across, like these are some common, mental health things you might be dealing with. And like, these are quick tips and like resources is how you can, prevent these kinds of things. This is how you can alleviate this. This is where you should, like, just having resources available at early age and educating them young, and teaching the self-reflection part. Because I really do believe that any kind of like rehabilitation in physical and mental form really comes first from that self-reflection point. And then comes from like that pathway of, okay, now I can recover from there. But if you can't get to that self-reflection point, it's very hard to recover from a lot of different elements, because you might not be able to identify that core problem which is going on. So I think I think that it needs to be more engraved and taught, and then have more open conversations around it. Because if I think those two things it can save a bunch of lives. It can make people more productive. It can really teach how to control these things, or not even just control them, but like live a happier life and just focus on lifestyle. And then to your point on productivity and how it all impacts, it's quite surprising to me actually that companies don't take things like mental health more seriously. Or I think some companies now are, and they're actually providing free resources, like even on top of like employee benefits, that you can get help and mental health assistance and all that kind of stuff. Because at the end of the day, the happier employee, the more productive the employee, the better everybody is. And I think that's where like the newer generations, I think our ideal job is what makes you happy. It's no longer anymore like X paycheck or this thing. For some people it might be, and that's perfectly fine too if you're going for those paychecks. But most people now are looking for like that happiness metric and like what actually fulfills them, which is more important, and how that all ties into scope.
Yeah, and just another thing that I was thinking about too is because I guess we talk a lot about like the workspace and in school, but also like when you go see your healthcare provider, a lot of doctors aren't or weren't previously trained in looking for the signs of a person who's struggling with mental health. Now I think it's changing. I think I've heard like doctors are now learning more about like eating disorders and anxiety. And so I just really hope that also changes. And also just people like minorities also, they tend to get disregarded a lot by their healthcare providers as well. So hopefully the training improves there, where like you can look for the signs and ask the right questions, and not discriminate against people. So I also hope that that area changes as well. And just like you talking about the self-reflection, that's so big, because that's honestly like, I think most of us can relate when we say like self-reflection was like the biggest pivotal point in our recovery journeys, because just knowing where like your triggers come from and knowing how you react to certain things and what your limits are, what your boundaries are, that recognizing all that definitely results in a much better life. So that's super important, and it's a really good thing that you brought that up.
I think like overall, like we're talking like mental health is it's a broad topic with so many small micro elements to it. There's so many things that societally can be improved to, help those with mental health issues. Medical field, of course, like I think the biggest issue why that unfortunately isn't that, it's just how the US healthcare system is structured in the first place, which is unfortunate since it is through private industry. There is incentives for doctors, for example, to prescribe medication pills versus providing mental health support because of how it functions as an entity. Because I'm originally from Finland, and it's quite different in Finland how they do their healthcare system versus here in the United States. But I think that also kind of goes down into the flaws. Like it really comes from also societal structures. And not to say one is better or worse, but you always have to kind of compound it, because I do think healthcare providers should be more knowledgeable of these things and be able to educate more and focus in on it. But it's difficult because of how it's structured in the United States, which I do think
so
it kind of impacts. Yeah, it impacts those minority groups and those other
totally
avenues.
I know. It's like once you get into the healthcare aspect and the structure of it, you just start going down this rabbit hole of issues that you find. It's like doctors can only spend 15 minutes with their patients, and then there's not a lot of healthcare places in minority communities, and like all these issues that just like, oh man, I can't believe you're struggling with this, and it definitely needs to change like ASAP.
Racism fucking sucks, huh? Prejudice will get you. Yeah, man. I mean, I know me growing up. I come from a super low income household, so like I never really went to hospitals. I went to clinics. So like that, like it's transactional. It's you get in there and they say, all right, what's wrong with you? And you go, I don't know. And they go, all right, well, go get an x-ray or go do this, go do that. They just want to find out what might be wrong, and then just kind of shell you off. Yeah, and that sucks. That sucks really bad. I think it's my very little English speaking mother who was diagnosed with clinical depression, just getting tossed around left and right front and center to like different doctors that were just like, we don't know what's wrong with her. Is it her blood pressure? Well, she's diabetic, so it might be this, it might be that. It's like, no, you assholes, she was fucking depressed. Like, it's like, it sucks. It's like, it sucks, and I'm glad that she's getting the help now, but like, you touch on a very real topic, which is mental health. A lot of resources, a lot of these things have been allocated towards a certain group of people for a long time. These resources, and now it's thankfully becoming not so ivory tower-esque for you to get a mental health checkup, or for a doctor to take you seriously if you tell them that you are there to figure out what's wrong with you, as opposed to you already knowing what's wrong with you. Proactive as opposed to reactive healthcare, thankfully, is becoming a real thing here in the States. But yeah, that stuff's real. That stuff's real. You have minority women specifically who have for a long time been suffering, whether that's through really any part, through them giving birth, through them having just general health issues, through them having mental health issues. All these things, people of minority people have long dealt with the short end of the stick, and I'm excited that we're trending, and that you mentioned as well, we're trending in a position that's going to take us somewhere that is better than where we're at now. Whether that's doctors actually asking about mental health, asking about eating disorders, having that knowledge to be able to identify those things, I think is big, and I think I'm thankful that it is going to be something that helps other people, like in a very serious way.
Mm-hmm. It's cool to see all these like different therapy apps and platforms come out, like Talkspace and BetterHelp, and the way that they provide their therapists by using like the sliding scale option so that people can pay based on their income. I think is really cool. And that just goes to show that like we're trying to make strides. I mean, obviously, like there are things that we still need to fix, obviously, in our country, but definitely like we're on our way.
Yeah, it's a build-up. It's a process. It'll get there, and I'm excited that, I'm excited that it is happening, and I hope that it does get. I mean, you have to. I mean, I goodness gracious, like the only thing we have on this world is like the hope that it's gonna get better. But yeah, I hope it gets better, and I'm sure it will.
I mean, technology does drive those. Technology, I to the point of technology overall, aside from Zoom being terrible sometimes, technology does drive industries to change. And I think like what we're talking about, the reason why the medical industry has been what it is for such a long time is because they've had such a strong grasp and hold on that industry. Technology now is making things more accessible. Telehealth is now here. There's new systems. I had a conversation with this one healthcare professional who's talking about integrating a blockchain into the healthcare system and other technologies and all these kinds of things. And it got me super excited because he explained to me how they can decrease the cost substantially and make it more affordable. And he's coming out of the Palm Spring area of like the East Palm Springs, which is a very low income neighborhood and area when it comes to the Inland Empire. And he was explaining like why he's trying to build it out there and why telehealth is so important and how you can do all these things. And I was just like, wow, like that gets me like super excited about where things can go, because that change is coming from younger people that are kind of pushing back and saying like, no, this isn't right. Like it needs to be more equitable. It needs to be better in this way, and technology allows that to happen faster than an infrastructure to change, right? Like infrastructure is just not going to change that fast. The US is not going to change the way they go about their healthcare system. There's too many jobs dependent on it in the cycle, and then it'll get into a political mess anyways. But the technology, I think, can drive those avenues through the gaps, right? So in mental health, I think application-based, using AI, connecting it with other therapists and experts around the world, I think that's a fantastic way. Things that, educate people on things like anxiety and all these kinds of things. Super great. So it's exciting times to see where we're kind of moving forward, but it all goes down to the bottom line. What we're talking about is more open, genuine conversations about these things and having voices being heard, because the more that people realize that I'm not the only one struggling with this, or other people also understanding it, you actually might inspire someone who is a computer scientist to figure out the solution for it, right? And then they actually might build a platform that makes this place even a better place. So I think it all comes full circle, but it just comes first from that openness conversation that's so important to be had. Alrighty.
Yeah,
You got something, Luis?
No, I was gonna say I agree with you 100%. I think technology is gonna make it super accessible to everybody.
This is the first time I ever heard you say I agree. So I will hold you to that. That's a fantastic.
Good thing we got this on recording.
I know exactly. It's documented at this point. You can never get away from it. But yeah, so I mean, we've had a really good conversation about mental health and everything that ties into that, from the different avenues, and obviously what, from your background all the way to you kind of building out your own social platform and your articulation and what you're trying to impact and get backwards. But the one thing that we always end this show with, and it kind of ties into the whole aspect of mental health, is failure stories. And the reason why we do that, specifically tied into, is the stigma associated with failure, because that is one thing that actually does trigger for a lot of people different mental health issues, or kind of struggles with competition, or how they relate themselves in the real world to other people, because it's a point of a downturn for an individual. But I personally think it's the biggest turn point for that individual if you treat it correctly and you learn from it and you try to do something from a point of failure in your life. So we end with the guests providing us with a failure story. If there is a story you would like to share with us, tying into a point in your life where things might have gone the opposite direction, but turn it around, and the floor is all yours to share whatever story you'd like to share with us.
Yeah. Ooh. Okay. So definitely the salient thing in my mind right now is when I transferred to the University of California, Davis from my community college. I initially transferred as a nutrition student because I wanted to be a dietitian. And the reason I wanted to be a dietitian was because I worked with a dietitian in my intensive outpatient therapy program, and she changed my life. She didn't just like give me a meal plan and like weighed me or whatever and like did all that technical logistical stuff, but she felt like an older sister to me, someone that I just felt so comfortable around. And we really talked about like incredibly deep topics and things that I just didn't know about myself and why I was doing certain things. And we really dug together, and she was just willing to go with me all the way through that journey. And so because of working with her, I was just like, oh my gosh, like I feel so inspired by her, and like I want to do the exact same thing that she did to me, that like I hope that I can do that to other people. And so yeah, that's why I wanted to become a dietitian. And so I originally transferred to Davis to do that. But the thing was, I was still heavily struggling with my eating disorder and anxiety, and my body image was just, I felt like it was getting worse and worse because I was actually recovering, or like becoming weight restored. And so it was just a lot of things to deal with in my mind. And so mental health takes up a lot of space in your mind, and it doesn't really leave room for a lot of other things. And so I was going through my studies, I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot keep up with this. Like these lessons are just way too hard. And just like all the scientific stuff. And it was kind of new to me because I've always been more drawn to like the creative side of things, like writing, drawing and all that. So my mind, I guess, wasn't really used to working this way, especially in a college setting. I mean, I'm always fascinated by science, but like this is just like another level. So I had to make the hard decision to drop out of the nutrition program and switch over to communications, which was actually my original plan because I wanted to become a writer. And the field is definitely a lot easier. Like the concepts are a lot easier to grasp, especially because like I guess I was training myself in that niche as well. So I graduated with a communications degree, and I was like, man, I really wish I pursued dietetics, but you know, looking back on it now, like I definitely could not have done it. And so, yeah, that's just kind of like, I guess my failure story was that I went to go into one field and I just had to admit to myself that I couldn't do it. And for me, like being a perfectionist as well, that was so hard to admit to myself. And just being someone who really wants to work hard at school and get good grades and everything, it felt like a huge defeat. But in the end, it turned out a lot better because I actually had time to go see the therapist on campus, and I had time to kind of reflect. And even though I was still heavily struggling with anxiety after I graduated. I feel like I learned a lot about myself during that time. And, it's never too late to go back to school. So I am planning to go back to school and become a dietitian still, because it's just been on my mind since then. But yeah, I just feel like it's so important to recognize these times and not regret it, because you always learn something, as you said. Like, you plan for one thing and it turns out the opposite, but you still learn from it, no matter what it is. So that was like a huge learning period for me, and definitely a humbling moment. And it felt so huge at the time, but now I look back on it and I'm like, I turned out fine.
Yeah, I mean I think that's one of the most important things when it comes to reflection, is in any point in your life, that moment is going to be the most important moment of your life. But as you look back on it, you'll start reflecting, understanding that there was so many different things that actually were going on at the same time that it might have been harder to kind of dissect through. And I think one question I have to follow up based off your story is, like, if you were to talk with somebody who currently is going through failure, what is some advice you would give them based off your journey? Because what you just explained, I do think a lot of college students go through that exact kind of process. They go into college with wanting to do a certain thing. They might not be able to do it, and they're hitting that exact same experience you're doing. So do you have any advice for those students that might be going through that in their own lives?
Yeah, I guess I can speak to like what I wish I would have heard when I was going through this, but I would really say to someone, just like slow down for a second. I felt like I was in a huge rush to make a decision about my future. And I felt like every single decision I made was very permanent. So I would say just slow down, take a moment to, again, like reflect on where you are in your life at this moment. What can you honestly, realistically handle? And if you can't handle something, is this something that you can still do in the future? And the answer to that is most likely yes, you probably can do that in the future. But some things take priority at one season in your life, but that doesn't mean that always is going to be a priority in your life. So just kind of recognizing like, okay, what do I have to work on right now so that I can eventually get to my bigger goals? And then also I think just getting a lot of outside opinion as well from people who you trust can also really help, because you can get really caught up in your head. And you can start telling yourself a bunch of different things, and it just gets so chaotic up there, and like all these voices are like screaming at you to do something, and they're like contradicting each other. So I think getting an outside opinion also really helps, because you can kind of see like almost an unbiased view on your situation and kind of put things into perspective. And that's something like I kind of wish I did a little bit more as well. I have this tendency to bottle up all of my feelings because I don't want to burden anyone. But you have to realize, like, if you have people you can trust, these people most likely are your friends who you would want them to come to you when they're feeling really like depressed or anxious, or dealing with something really difficult. So that situation is reciprocal. So you can also go to them and tell them what you're going through and get their opinion on stuff. So yeah, that's probably what I would say to someone who's going through a similar situation right now.
So yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that story, and thank you so much for providing that advice. Like I said, I do think a lot of college students are constantly going through that exact struggle that you went through, and it's I think one thing that you brought up that I think is the most important thing is we at a young age like to rush stuff, but we have time. Like you can make all the mistakes in your entire life in your 20s, and you'll be fine in your 30s. Like that is the reality of the situation, but you have to kind of like take a step back and be like, all right, let's take a deep breath and let's see where we go from here. But I know when I'm still young, but I was still thinking that like when I was young, like getting into my 20s, like I was always thinking like I need to get this now, I need to do this, I need to do that. Now that I'm getting a little bit older, I'm just like, let's take time, let's a little bit more patience. I'm still, I still expect stuff fast, but a little bit more patience there. And I think that's a very important take. Awesome. But yeah, so the other part for how to we can close it out is tying in how can people communicate with you, how can they follow you, tied into any of your Instagram, any of your other websites, any other channels, or any other mediums that people can stay connected and find out more about mental health and follow along with your own journey?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me at my main channel, which is at this Hana B, like Bzbee, B-E-E. And then you can also find me at my other platform, which is called You'll Be Okay. Again, like a honeybee. And so you can find me on Instagram on there as well. That page is a little bit more, I would say like educational, also like kind of spunky and like funny. Again, like bringing that humor back into mental health, you know, like I want to my whole goal with this page is to make mental health not so taboo and like make it even like a little bit funny to talk about, like provocative almost. So you can find me there. That's going to be a little bit more like educational stuff and funny stuff. And then my personal one is more like my own personal take on the conversations going on that page. And then I do not have a website yet, but it is in the works. So when it does go up, you can find it at you'llbeokay.com. And actually for the month of May and June, because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, I'm hosting a fundraiser on fundly.com. And I'm trying to raise $1,000 for the National Eating Disorder Association, which is the largest nonprofit organization that helps people suffering from eating disorders find treatment. They also raise funds for research and just like awareness and everything. So I'm hosting a fundraiser on there. You can find the link in both of the Instagram bios. And if you donate $15 or more, you can get a more than a number pin. Which is just like a mantra that I always say to myself, that you're like more than the number on the scale, number of the size on your waist, jeans, and like, you know, your GPA. It's like we define ourselves by numbers every single day now. Just like how many followers you have, how many likes you have, how much money is your business coming in. So it's just like kind of a reminder that you're more than that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much
seriously.
for everything. Yeah. Great conversation. Great details. Great tips. I know me and Luis definitely appreciate you having on the show, and having this open conversation about everything. Definitely, our amazing videographer here, Nick, who nobody can see because he's behind the screens. We'll definitely throw those links in the description as we post this, and hopefully we can help you get to that goal that you have for this event.
Thank you so much, guys. This was so much fun. I seriously, like, such an honor being on here, and thank you for everything that you do as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for those tuning in to the Brew. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to throw in the chat box. We're of course happy to always answer the questions people have, and also that helps us kind of figure out who we should get as the next guest, because we want to continue these open conversations in different fields. But that's it for the Brew for this week. Thank you for tuning in.